that went up to him and asked George, "Do you want me to play the same thing 168 times, or do you want me to play 168 different DS? This is driving me crazy." I didn't want to do that, but some people, like the people he was living with, said, "George, listen to this one and see what you think. I played it." He said, "That's great. What is that?" I replied. "That's number one." Leon Russell was one of those musicians. Lyon had a history that shone brightly at times, but eventually faded from view in a way that seems unfair. His talent, influence, and contributions to rock, country, and gospel music were key in shaping the careers of some of the biggest names in the business. But despite all his success, Lyon was a complicated person who dealt with personal problems and a string of bad luck that, for someone who was so important to American music, it's strange how little he's talked about when people talk about the best musicians of all time. Before he died, he told the shocking truth about working with George Harrison. What did he say? Let's find out. To understand Leon Russell's story, you need to start with his childhood. Russell was born Claude Russell Bridge in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in 1942. His childhood was anything but easy. He had cerebral palsy as a baby, which paralyzed some of his right side. This gave him a limp and made him an easy target for bullying. It's hard to believe that Leon, the tall, intimidating figure behind the piano with his long hair and beard, who seemed to be in charge of any stage he played, was once a young boy who was picked on by his peers because of his appearance. Growing up in Tulsa in the 1950s, a conservative city that focused on sports, he was naturally talented in music and started playing in local clubs when he was only 14. He developed a style that was all his own, which was influenced by the fact that his cerebral palsy made it hard for him to play the piano in the same way as other people. His right hand couldn't do as many complex movements as his left, so he made up for it by developing an hugely impressive left-hand technique that would eventually set him apart from other musicians. It was in his early years in Tulsa that Jerry Lee Lewis noticed Leon's immense talent and took him on the road, which gave Russell a taste of the wider world of music beyond Oklahoma. His connection to music was undeniable, and he soon found. When he moved to Los Angeles, he quickly rose through the ranks and became a member of the Wrecking Crew, a group of top session musicians who played on some of the most famous songs of the 1960s. If you've ever listened to the Beach Boys, Frank Sinatra, or any of, you may have heard Lyon play the piano on Phil Spector's productions. His style was unique, and he had an innate ability to find the exact musical moment that would elevate a song. It didn't matter how complicated or crowded the arrangement was, this ability to find space in even the busiest of compositions made him famous. But Lon wasn't happy with just working with Sid. He had his own goals. And in the late 1960s, he started to branch out by starting his own record label, Shelter Records, and a duo called the Asylum Choir. Neither of these ventures was an immediate success, but they paved the way for what was to come. It was during this time that Leon began working with Delaney and the white duo Bonnie, signed to Stax Records, mixed Southern rock, blues, and gospel in a way that hadn't been done before. Their second album, Except No Substitute, didn't sell very well, but it became a kind of secret handshake among musicians. The album was passed around like a hidden gem, and Eric Clapton, George Harrison, and Elton John all took note of Leon's work with the band. Delaney and Bonnie were the start of a big thing. Russell was a part of a movement that would shape American music for the next 10 years, blending rock, gospel, blues, and country into a sound that was uniquely Southern and his own. By 1969, Leon Russell was ready to come out of the shadows and into the light. His work with Delaney and Bonnie had already caught the attention of some of the big names in the business. But now he was ready to take center stage. He started putting together a band by hiring some of the best musicians he had worked with over the years and giving it his own sound. The band Lyon put together became famous, and some of its members went on to tour with Joe Cocker on the Mad Dogs and Englishmen tour, which was huge, chaotic, and often drug-filled. The tour was a turning point for both Cocker and Russell. Cocker, who had just performed at Woodstock, needed a band to help him cash in on his newfound fame, and Russell was more than up to the job. The Mad Dogs and Englishmen tour was unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. With almost 50 people on stage at any given time, it was more like a traveling circus than a rock band. Lyon, dressed in a top hat and Captain America t-shirt, took on the role of. He was in charge of keeping the music going and coordinating the chaos. The band mixed rock, gospel, and blues in a way that felt both natural and carefully planned. The tour was a huge success, but it came at a price. Lyon was suffering from severe stage fright, a condition that had been a problem for him his whole life. Even though he was a huge star on stage, he often felt deeply uncomfortable. Lyon was having a hard time with his mental health and feeling uncomfortable in public. His habit of going overboard was also starting to hurt him. Drugs, orgies, and other wild behavior were common on the Mad Dogs tour. Rita Kluge, who was dating Lyon at the time, said that the tour was full of chaos and debauchery. According to Collage, the band members would line up in the people on the tour got sexually transmitted diseases because of how wild life was on tour. Lyon's personal problems and the chaos of the Mad Dogs tour eventually caused a rift between him and Joe Cocker, who had started the tour as the headliner but felt overshadowed by Russell. In fact, Lyon was on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine, not Cocker, and tensions between the two boiled over. Cocker felt betrayed because he thought Russell had used the tour too. After the Mad Dogs and Englishmen tour, Lyon continued to build his career by putting out a series of solo albums that cemented his place in the pantheon of great American musicians. Songs like A Song for You and This Masquerade were covered by artists from Ray Charles to the Carpenters. Russell's unique mix of rock, gospel, and country music struck a chord with many people. Lyon continued to have problems with his mental health. Even though he was one of the biggest stars in music for a while and had a lot of fans, he was often called paranoid, and his depressive episodes became more common. Friends and co-workers have since suggested that he may have. He had bipolar disorder or Asperger's syndrome, but these conditions weren't well known or talked about at the time. Lyon's strange behavior only added to the myths about him. Kluge once said that on the way from Memphis to Los Angeles, Lyon refused to get out of the car. He drove a car because he was afraid of people looking at him. He was also known for making strange demands, like the time he insisted on getting a pet monkey instead of having kids. As the 1970s went on, Lyon's career started to fall apart. His once groundbreaking style of music started to become less popular as disco and punk rock took over the airwaves, and his record sales dropped. By the end of the decade, he had found himself. By the 1980s, Lyon Russell had almost disappeared from public view. His music was no longer selling, and he was having a hard time finding work. He had gone from being one of the most sought-after session musicians and producers in the world to someone who was barely making ends meet. He went back to his home studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and continued to make music. The music business had changed, and Russell's style, which had once defined a generation, didn't seem to fit with the new tastes of the time. Even his live shows, which used to be electric, weren't drawing big crowds anymore. Russell's personal life also became more isolated. His marriage to Mary McCree, with whom he had worked musically, ended in divorce in 1980, and he found himself out of the spotlight, unable to regain the fame he once enjoyed. For many, Leon Russell had become a forgotten figure in rock history, but Russell kept making music in the background, never losing his love for the art form. Craft, even if no one was listening. In 2010, Revival got an unexpected chance when Elton John, one of Leon's past collaborators and a longtime fan, reached out. Elton had never forgotten Leon. Russell had a big impact on his career, and after years of seeing Russell's name fade from public view, he wanted to give his old friend a second chance. Together, they decided to make an album that would bring Russell back into the spotlight, which led to The Union, a collaboration that, when it came out in October 2010, The Union, which combined Elton John's long-lasting popularity with Russell's timeless songwriting, got great reviews and helped Leon Russell reach a new generation of listeners. The album showed off Russell's unique blend of rock, blues, and gospel that made him a star in the first place. Russell's health was fragile at this point, and he had brain surgery not long before recording the album. Despite his physical problems, his voice and musicianship remained strong, and his performances on The Union reminded fans and critics alike of his immense talent. The album was nominated for a Grammy Award, and the singer's popularity grew. Leon Russell continued to perform and record music after the success of The Union, but his health kept getting worse. He stayed busy on the road, playing for smaller, more dedicated crowds who appreciated his contributions to music history. His last studio album, Life Journey, came out in 2014 and included a special tribute to the band. A mix of original songs and covers that showed his wide range of influences. Leon Russell died peacefully in his sleep on November 13, 2016, at the age of 74. His later years may not have been as famous as his early ones, but he left behind a rich musical legacy that continues to inspire artists today. Leon Russell's story is one of great triumph and quiet persistence. Even though he went from being a big star to being unknown, his unique sound, which mixed rock, gospel, country, and blues, has endured and can still be heard in the work of many musicians today. He never stopped making music because he loved it so much. His ability to change with the times and stay true to his artistic vision made him a lasting figure in the world of rock and roll, even though his time in the spotlight was short. Leon Russell and George Harrison started dating in the early 1970s, when both were at the top of their careers. Russell was already well known as a session musician and a solo artist. Met Harrison as the former Beatle was starting his solo career after leaving the Beatles. Their work together was most visible at Harrison's famous concert for Bangladesh in 1971, which was one of the first major charity events in rock history. Harrison put together the concert to raise money for Bangladesh Liberation War refugees, and he invited Russell to perform with a great group of musicians, including Bob Dylan, Ringo Starr, Eric Clapton, and Ravi Shankar. Russell's attendance at the concert showed how highly Harrison thought of Russell. Russell was a strong presence at the event as a musician and performer, and his unique mix of rock, blues, and gospel gave the performances a different feel. For Bangladesh, one of the best parts of the concert was R's version of the Rolling Stones' Jumping Jack Flash mixed with Young Blood by the Coasters. His energetic performance included his gritty vocals and signature piano playing. Russell's performance electrified the crowd and showed his ability to seamlessly blend genres. It also showed his willingness to take creative risks, which Harrison admired. Russell's performance became one of the most talked about parts of the concert, further solidifying his reputation as a dynamic live performer. Harrison and Russell both admired each other's musical abilities. The two musicians' working relationship was based on mutual respect. Harrison was influenced by British rock and Indian classical music, while Russell was influenced by American rock, blues, and gospel. However, they both loved working together and trying new things. Their willingness to try new musical directions helped them become closer. Besides playing on the concert for Bangladesh, Russell also played on Harrison's 1970 album All Things Must Pass. Harrison's first solo album after the Beatles broke up was a huge hit, and Russell's vocals and piano playing helped shape its sound. Russell's gospel-inspired piano style complemented Harrison's reflective songwriting and spiritual themes, especially on tracks like Beware of Darkness and Awaiting on You. All the album would go on to become one of Harrison's most acclaimed works, with Russell's contributions often praised for their emotional depth. Harrison and Russell were friends outside of the studio, and on stage they shared similar values, especially a sense of spirituality that showed up in their music. Harrison was deeply influenced by Indian philosophy and spirituality, and Russell was raised in gospel and Southern spirituality. This brought them together on a deeper level. Both men saw music as a form of expression that went beyond entertainment. While their careers went in different directions after the early 1970s, Russell and Harrison continued to respect each other. Even though Leon Russell has died, his music continues to find new fans and connect with people of all ages. His work, which has been described as a mix of rock, country, and blues, was a major influence on subsequent generations. Russell was a big part of the sound of the 1970s, and his influence can still be felt today. Many artists, young and old, say that Russell was a big inspiration for their own work, especially because he was able to cross musical genres and combine different styles in his work with artists like Bob Dylan, George Harrison, and Joe Jackson. Cocker are still remembered as some of the most famous moments in rock history, and musicians all over the world study and admire his session work. Russell's rise to fame after the Union not only brought him to a wider audience, but it also gave people a chance to think more deeply about his career. For many, his work as a session musician had been overshadowed by his solo work, but as his fans listened to his earlier work again, they realized how important he was in shaping some of the most memorable recordings of the 1960s and 1970s. His piano playing on songs like Bird's Mr. Tambourine Man and Herb Al's A Taste of Honey showed how versatile and skilled he was as a musician, able to fit into different musical settings while still leaving his own mark on them. Russell was a pioneer for independent artists long before it was popular. He took charge of his music career by starting his own record label, Shelter Records, in 1969. This let him release his music on his own terms, without having to deal with the restrictions of major record labels. The label also gave other up-and-coming artists a place to show their work. Shelter released early work by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and Russell's independent spirit would later become an example for many musicians who want to keep creative control over their work in an industry that often values commercial success over artistic integrity. Leon Russell's connection to the music community went beyond his own success. His kindness and generosity have helped many musicians. Russell's willingness to work with others, whether through session work or full-fledged partnerships, made him a popular figure among his peers. Elton John, in particular, often talked about how he felt grateful to Russell for helping him out and mentoring him in the beginning. In interviews promoting the Union, Elton John emphasized that Russell had a huge impact on his career and that he felt it was his duty to help Russell get back into the public eye. This act of friendship not only rekindled Russell's career but also showed how much Elton John and many others respected and admired him. Russell's contributions to the growth of genres like Southern rock, country rock, and even gospel rock cannot be overstated. He had a big impact on artists like the brothers Lard Skyer and Willie Nelson, and he is often given credit for blurring the lines between country and rock music. His unique mix of country storytelling with the energy and attitude of rock and roll made him a key figure in the development of these styles. It's like Tightrope and A Song for You showed that he could write highly emotional and relatable songs that could move people no matter what genre they liked. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos like this.